Parshas Matos-Masei, and for our friends in Eretz Yisrael, Parshas Masei. At the end of Parshas Masei, the Torah talks about the consequences of someone who kills wrongfully. That could be premeditated, in which case we call it murder, ritzicha, and it could be that a person kills inadvertently. The Torah also refers to that as ritzicha, but it's not murder. It's what we might call manslaughter. Shogeg, which is an inadvertent killing, as opposed to mazid, which is intentional, purposeful. So if all of the requirements for capital punishment are there for a murderer, which is that there are witnesses and the witnesses cite the verses that prohibit murder, and the perpetrator says, Afal pichein, nevertheless, I will go ahead and do it, and he demonstrates conclusively his premeditation, then he's liable for the death penalty. If someone kills another bishogeg, that is inadvertently, then he is banished to a city of refuge until the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, passes away. The Torah says in this week's Parsha that neither the murderer nor the person who commits manslaughter can get out of their respective punishments by paying money. The verse says, this is in Perek Lamed Hey, Pasuk Lamed Beis, that's 35-32. V'lo sikhu, so, excuse me, we're going to start with 31. Lamed Aleph. V'lo sikhu kofer lenefesh rotzeach u'shurasha lamus kemos yumas. Cannot take a payment from a murderer in lieu of his death penalty. And the next verse says, V'lo sikhu kofer lenus el u'mekleto. And similarly, a person who is liable for being banished because of an inadvertent killing, he can't buy his way out of that as well. And then the verse, and this is what I'd like to focus on, the next verse, which is Lamed Gimel 33, says, V'lo sachanifu es ha'aretz asher atem ba, and you shall not, and here's the question. Chanifa is typically translated in its usage as flatter. It doesn't seem to work here. You shall not flatter the land. Now, Rashi and others say you shouldn't cause it to do evil, or you shouldn't tarnish the land. It's a negative thing. What exactly it is, we're going to come to. We're going to come back to that. Ki'adam hu yachanif es, because the blood will be, and I'm going to use the Hebrew word chonef, which again we typically translate as flattering the land. So the land won't grant atonement. What does this mean? What does it mean you shall not flatter the land? Well, typically, flattery means to give somebody excessive praise, unwarranted praise. Both the Malbim and the Torah T'mimah, and there may be others, who say that an example of flattery is telling a person who has done a bad thing or who himself is a bad person that he's good. The thing he did was good. He's a good person. One might view chanifa as, when it comes to how we treat a person, as the flip side of the coin of gaiva. Ga'ava, is we translate it as pride or arrogance. And generally, it doesn't mean that a person doesn't think well of himself, but it does mean that he doesn't think more of himself than is warranted. So that's when a person himself is arrogant. He may have skills, he may have talents, he may have capabilities, but if he thinks that he's more than that, then that's arrogance, that's gaiva. Chanifa is when you ascribe more than to a person, generally to his face, in order to gain, this is generally the purpose for chanifa, is to gain some kind of favor or benefit. You ascribe a greatness that that individual does not possess. Both refer to toho kabaro, that it is the opposite of, or inconsistent with, this notion of the outside reflecting the inside. So this is creating an illusion of grandeur. Now, how does this apply to the land? So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein views the terminology of the land to mean functioning civil society, like orach ar'a, the way of the land, or derech eretz, the way of the land. So eretz refers to the functioning of society. And he says, don't confuse the importance of the functioning of society with the significance of the life of an individual. He observes that all governments, all kingdoms, all countries prohibit murder, but many do so only on pragmatic grounds. And this is probably grounded in the philosophy of the social contract. Many of the Renaissance philosophers struggled with the notion of morality, especially if morality is divorced from divine being. Then the question is, well, what controls human relations? How can we say this is good and this is bad? So there are those who say there's a social contract, which is that we all agree to act in a certain way, because otherwise our lives will be pretty miserable if everybody does exactly what they want, and if people don't respect each other's property and each other's lives, etc. Moshe says that this is not the Torah value. He says in society, which is pragmatic, that's the aretz. So if a particular individual is disruptive or inconvenient, so there might be a tendency to devalue that life. So, and he says this specifically, and many of us know this from personal experience, that when it comes to, for example, the treatment of very old or very feeble people in a hospital, there may be a sense of, it's not worth it. It's not worth treating them. What's the quality of life? And there isn't a recognition among the purveyors of that idea that life has a supreme value in and of itself. And so somebody who goes in to a hospital in a very precarious state may not, depending on their other conditions, may not get the same treatment as somebody who is healthier. I'm not getting into the entire area of medical ethics here, but just as a rule, there seems to be a devaluation of human life when it comes to pragmatic considerations. Moshe says every second of every life is precious. And that's why even for someone who is terminally ill, it is permissible to violate the Shabbos in order to prolong their life, because every moment of life is precious. So, according to the Torah's view then, says Rav Moshe, this is in a sefer called Kol Ram, which has some of Rav Moshe's Torah, the Eretz is always subordinate to human life. And if someone were to buy their way out of the consequences, the Torah's punishment for killing, if someone were able to buy their way out, then what that would be saying is, look, there's a pragmatic way to deal with this. I'll pay the penalty. I'll go on and live my life. That would perhaps make sense from a perspective of pragmatism, but that would be flattering the civil society as opposed to giving appropriate due to human life. And Rav Moshe extends this in a particular example to the observance of Shabbos. He says many people make a mistake, and they think that the purpose of Shabbos is to rest on the Sabbath so that we can be recharged and work to our full capacities during the week. And he says we have it all wrong. That's chanifa. Now, chanifa, we've termed it as flattery, but what it really is ascribing superior value to something which should appropriately be ascribed subordinate value. And what that's doing is ascribing superior value to the work and to the work week and to the functioning of the economy and civil society, etc. So one could view Shabbos as the handmaiden of productivity. And he says that formula is 180 degrees incorrect. The work that we do for Shabbos is subordinate to Shabbos. And so, you should work for 6 days and do all of your work. And then Shabbos is a day for Hashem, meaning that we work during the week so that we may come to Shabbos, so that we can enjoy Shabbos, so that we can be prepared for Shabbos. And on Shabbos, our principal concern is our relationship with the Almighty. And it gives us an ability to reflect. And it gives us an ability to recenter and reground so that we don't lose our way, or, as the Gemara says, the acuity of our eyesight, because of the great strides that we take during the week. The week is not served by Shabbos. The week serves Shabbos. The land is not served by man. The land serves man. And to reverse those roles, to reverse that ascription of relative weight and importance, is to engage in chanifa. Part of being a student of the Torah is to always be mindful of priorities, what's important and what's subordinate. Have a good Shabbos.